Technology has a way of creating exciting new opportunities in the birding world, and camera bird feeders like this one from PeckPerk is just one example. But are they worth the money, and how do they hold up in a Canadian winter? I'm going to tell you everything that you need to know to figure out if one of these smart bird feeders is right for you. I'm Shayna Cossette, and you're watching Shayna Cossette Birding. I want to start this video off by letting you know that it is not sponsored. I am not getting paid anything to make this video, and all of the opinions are my own. PeckPerk did gift me this feeder, and that's why I wanted to do a full test of the Canadian winter conditions before I decided if it was worth recommending to you guys to spend your hard-earned money on. We all know what the economy is like nowadays, and I want to make sure that anything that I promote on this channel, whether gifted or sponsored now or in the future, is going to be worth you spending your money on. And with this, as well as any future reviews I do on this channel, absolutely none of this is required for birding. All you have to do to really enjoy birding is go out and look at birds. But with that being said, if you do have some room in your budget and you want to invest it in things like toys, binoculars, field guides, or camera bird feeders, they can be a really fun addition to your hobby. If you have never heard of camera bird feeders or smart bird feeders, you might be wondering, what even is this? So the Avia Peck one is it's a regular bird feeder, as you can see, but it has a wireless camera built into it. And it's very similar to a trail camera or like a home security camera, in the sense that the sensor in the camera detects motions and then it automatically starts recording, either taking a picture or recording a video. The video clips are then saved, in this case, to a micro SD card in the top of the camera, or it also connects through Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to an app on your phone where you can download the videos and images right off the app. So I didn't film a full unboxing video, but my friend Bright Eyed Birding already has, so if you want to see that, I've got it linked in the description below. I received the basic model of the Avia Peck feeder. It includes the feeder itself with the perch, an instruction booklet, the camera, the charger, and then it includes a tree mounting kit, a pole mounting kit, a tripod mounting kit, a wall and deck mounting kit. So I really don't think you're gonna have any trouble setting this up wherever you decide to, because it all came included with the bird feeder itself. And I definitely wasn't expecting that many options. The other thing that I really like is they include the hardware mounting stickers. So instead of trying to figure out where you would need to drill, you just have to peel this off, stick it on, and then it gives you the screws and the hangers to put it up, so you don't have to kind of guesstimate, you only have to really drill once. It's a really small touch, but it's also a really helpful one. As I mentioned earlier, it does not include a micro SD card, but it does come with a solar panel charger as well as a solar panel mounting kit. Other brands of smart bird feeders do have solar panel chargers as an add-on option, but they are not included in the base price of the unit. So I do really like that PeckPerk includes the solar panel with the feeder. So that is a little bit about what is included with a smart bird feeder, as well as what smart bird feeder's on. So now I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of all of the things that I tested out with this feeder over the last 4 weeks before putting this video together. So probably the most important thing you guys are wanting to know is what birds actually came and visited the bird feeder. I was actually very happy that almost every single one of my yard birds that I typically have come to my normal feeders all did come to the smart bird feeder. So that includes the black-capped chickadees, the red poles, the Canada jays, and even the hairy woodpeckers. And so I'm pretty confident that any of the birds that normally visit your regular bird feeders will probably also visit the smart bird feeder as well. The second thing I wanted to know was, how often do I have to refill the hopper or the kind of seed storage component of this bird feeder? Because as a bird feeder, if you have to refill it every hour, you're probably not going to use it very much. And so I was really curious to see how long it would last. The seed compartment is in the back and it goes on either side of the camera. So how long the bird seed actually lasts in the hopper will partially depend on what kind of seed you put in. I only feed black oil sunflower seeds, and so because they are a little bit bigger, they're going to take up more space, and therefore it's not going to last as long as something that, say, has like a millet mixture or is a lot smaller that you could fit more birdseed in. That being said, I did test it out, and it's about 2 days worth of black oil sunflower seeds. Now that probably doesn't sound like a lot, and partially is because this isn't the biggest bird feeder out there. I have a much larger regular bird feeder that can hold probably a week's worth of seed, but it's about 3 times the size of this one, so that kind of makes sense. The other thing is that the male hairy woodpecker who loves to come visit this feeder is also notorious for shoveling birdseed out of the bin, and I will put a clip in here so you can see as I'm talking about it. And he probably goes ahead and empties like at least a quarter of this bird feeder every time he visits it, so I'm pretty sure I could probably get 3 days worth out of it if I didn't have the hairy just throwing seed around. The other thing I wanted to know as a photographer especially was what kind of quality of the images and pictures do you get? Because if the photos are blurry or if the video doesn't allow you to determine which birds are visiting your feeder, then there's really not much point in having the camera portion. You might as well save your money and get just a regular bird feeder and try to get pictures with your cell phone. Now, this feeder definitely isn't going to replace any of your professional cameras by any means, but I do think it is a really, really good option if you are somebody who normally tries to just get pictures or videos with your phone or even phone scoped through a pair of binoculars. Because the bird is getting so close and landing right in front of the feeder, you're able to capture photos and videos of it without disrupting the birds, and so they're likely to stay longer, and you'll probably get a better look than trying to see from an angle out through a window. Videos are quite clear, and the videos do have the occasional lag or skip, but I don't really know for sure if that's my slow rural internet or actually a function of the feeder itself. The other thing is that because the camera is limited in the angle, if there's 2 birds that have very, very specific small identification features, this camera is probably not going to pick this up. An example that comes to mind is like the difference in the feather structure of like Allen's and Rufus hummingbird. So if it's something very, very close, you probably won't be able to ID between the 2, but that is something that most people aren't going to be able to ID between anyways, and for the general experience of birders, you should be able to tell which birds are visiting with pretty good clarity in both the pictures and the videos. So the cases where those ID features are just too similar to tell on here is also probably cases where they'd be too similar to tell just from a cell phone picture anyways, so I really don't think you're going to lose out much there. The other thing I was really happy about is that the files don't seem to take up a ton of room on the memory card or on my phone as well, which is really important because if it's taking thousands of pictures and videos and you had to keep emptying your SD card or phone, or it was filling up too fast and you weren't noticing it wasn't saving anymore, you might miss out on some of the birds that are coming to your yard. And so an example of this is that the one battery test that I had it out, it took over 2,000 videos and images, and it only took up about 3 gigabytes of data, which is pretty good. And so speaking of battery, this is probably what I was most interested in, is how long does the battery last on a single charge, and when the solar panel is plugged in, and when there is cold weather. In Canada, we get extremely cold winters, and everybody knows that battery and cold technically don't mix very well. So I was really curious to see how well this bird feeder was going to work. My first test of the battery life, I left the camera out and it died after 6 days, but that's without the solar panel hooked up, and it's 125 hours straight of the feeder running. It captured 2,277 photos and videos, and the temperature ranged from -5 degrees Celsius to -20 degrees Celsius. Currently, I've had the bird feeder out for 7 days with the solar panel plugged in, and I brought it in today for the video, and it's about 24% battery, but the temperatures have been much, much colder, anywhere from -24 to -28 Celsius on average, with the warmest day only being about -16 degrees Celsius. And that is also with the camera reliably taking over 100 photos and videos every single day. So by far, my biggest concern with trying out any of these smart camera bird feeders was the cold, because if they don't work in the Canadian winter, they're not going to be something I want to recommend. And that is because where I live in northern Saskatchewan, we have winter from about October all the way through until April, and we actually have freezing temperatures as early as August or September and into June. So that is well over half the year spent below freezing temperatures, especially at night. And so if the camera bird feeders aren't going to hold up to freezing temperatures, it's not something I was going to feel comfortable recommending. The PeckPerk bird feeders are rated to -15 degrees Celsius, which covers maybe half of the winter temperatures that we get, but most of my winter actually gets quite a bit colder than that. So I wanted to know two things. One, does it actually operate any colder? And if there is a temperature limit, what is that going to be? Now, knowing that it's only rated to -15 degrees Celsius, obviously be very careful operating this bird feeder colder than that. You might void your warranty, but honestly, it's not something I was worried about, because if I was going to get a bird feeder, and especially if I was going to pay for one, I'd want to be able to use it year round. So I went ahead and put it out in all sorts of weather conditions over the past month. So that's about midway through January into mid-February, which is typically our coldest temperatures. There was one temperature or one night where the camera did shut off completely and it got down to -36 degrees Celsius. I checked on the app and the camera shut off at about -32 Celsius in the night. And then after I brought it in, let it warm up completely, and then turned it back on, the camera is still working just fine, and so it didn't do any long-term lasting damage. I decided to put it back out a couple days later after it warmed up. The coldest temperature it was operating was -29, and these are all air temperatures too. I'm not including wind chill in this. And it did run, and it did stay on through -29. And then the temperatures throughout the days and following nights only got to about a low of -28, and it did stay on then too. It did lose battery a lot faster, obviously, in these more severe colder temperatures, but it didn't shut down completely. So I'm pretty comfortable saying the lower temperature limit of the PeckPerk bird feeder is about -30 degrees Celsius. And while I definitely have a few winter days that get colder than -30, the vast majority of the winter is actually warmer than that. So I'm pretty confident that I would be able to use this bird feeder about 95% of the winter, and I'm actually pretty impressed by that. Another thing I was curious about was how frost would impact the camera. Did the lens get frosty, and if it did it resolve itself on its own, or did it had to go out and be cleaned? I ended up getting frost on the camera twice. The first time it was during that really cold snap, and I did end up having to clean it off. The second time it was after a little bit of snowfall accumulation, and it did seem to resolve on its own, but for the most part it stayed pretty clear. So I don't think frost is going to be a huge issue. I do live quite close to a river, so there is a lot of humidity in the air, but potentially at some other locations frost may end up being more of a factor. From my experience anyways, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. So with that, the PeckPerk bird feeder gets the cold Canadian stamp of approval from me. The other thing I wanted to know is the app easy to use? And while I do think the app could benefit from some sort of tutorial video or quick walkthrough just to teach you where everything is, it was pretty easy to figure out on my own with very minimal instructions. The app is really handy because it lets you view how much battery is left on your feeder, if the solar panel is actively charging the feeder, how much space is being taken up and left on your memory card, and the playback feeder allows you to view the saved pictures and videos the feeder has taken when you weren't actively watching the live stream in the app. So if you choose to connect the feeder through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, you can watch the live stream of the feeder through the app. And the app also allows you to connect to 4 different devices on the same feeder. So if you have multiple people who are interested in seeing what's coming to the bird feeder, you guys don't have to fight over a phone. You can actually each hook up your individual one to it. The app is pretty easy to set up and use, and it also, you can connect to your feeder even if you are not connected to the Wi-Fi the feeder is. So I was actually able to check in on my bird feeder while at a couple different places at town and even out on the lake when I had cell service. And this is of course assuming that the feeder is still within Wi-Fi distance wherever you set it up. The app also allows you to take your own pictures and recordings of the live stream while you're watching it. The one thing I did notice though is that the screenshot function when the live stream is fully open doesn't appear to be working for me, but when the live screen is minimized, When the live stream is minimized, the screenshot button does work there, so you are still able to capture pictures. It just doesn't really work when it's in the full screen mode, so that might just be a technical issue. And because of the playback feature where it saves all the photos and videos, you can actually download them right to your phone directly from the app, so you can go through and instead of sitting on a computer and sorting through all the files, you can just pull it up on your phone, say I really want to save this one, and download it directly to your phone without having to do a file transfer, which is actually really handy, especially if something really cool or exciting shows up to your feeder and you want to send it to your friends right away. The feeder does have a squirrel alarm feature, which you can use to deter squirrels from eating all of your birdseed, but if there's birds around, you might end up scaring the birds too, so I would recommend using this feature with caution. I usually only have squirrels visiting my feeder in the summer, so this is not something I've had to use, and therefore I can't really speak to if it actually is successful in preventing squirrels from coming back to your feeder or not. One thing to keep in mind is where you choose to mount the feeder might actually be more successful at deterring the squirrels than the alarm itself. Using some sort of pole mount setup and potentially with a squirrel baffle underneath will be a lot more successful at keeping the squirrels away, as opposed to mounting it on a deck or a tree where the squirrels could easily climb onto it. So that's a little bit about what tests specifically I was looking for and some features of the app. So now I want to get into the pros and cons of camera bird feeders or smart bird feeders, some ideas of why it might be worth spending your money on a camera bird feeder, and also maybe some reasons why you might want to stick to traditional feeders. So the one pro that I have right off the bat is this feeder is always watching even when you aren't. If you keep a yard list, this might be the perfect way to make sure you're not missing any birds that are showing up to your yard, even if you're busy at work or have to run on a vacation or go out to the store. The bird feeder is always watching, and it's going to record whatever comes into your bird feeder. So if you can't be watching it all the time, you have the peace of mind of knowing that the camera is watching for you. This could also be especially helpful during migration periods where sometimes birds only show up for a day or two. An example of this was I had a female evening grosbeak that only showed up for one 24-hour period, and I only saw it once. And if I had missed catching it at the feeder, I would have never known that it was in my yard, and that was the only one I saw all year. It kind of makes you wonder, how many other birds am I actually missing? Maybe I'll know. Another huge pro that I see with these camera bird feeders is using it as an accessibility tool. I have some chronic health issues, and if you've watched my pelagic birding video, you have a little bit of an idea of that. But basically, whenever I have my health issues flare up, I can be stuck inside, sometimes stuck in bed, and this feeder will allow me to continue birding even when I can't be out birding in nature. I also think this feeder could be really fantastic for anybody who has mobility issues, especially if you're able to mount it somewhere where you can access it, like on a deck. Two things to keep in mind with this though is that the card slot as well as the screw to get into the refill part of the bird feeder do require some dexterity in the hands. So if you are somebody who has limited dexterity, these two portions might be a little challenging to actually operate from an accessibility standpoint. You have to be able to open the cover to turn it on and off, and then also to refill the hopper. I do think the hopper is actually stable enough that you could leave the screw out of it. You might have something like a squirrel or raccoon figure out how to open it up. It is actually quite sturdy without, as it kind of slides and it does kind of lock into place. So if the screw is a mobility issue for you, I do think you could probably use it without. And I don't know if it's just my hands, but I seem to have trouble getting this freaking cover off. So that there, you probably want to keep it closed so that you can weather seal it, but especially if it's like a little bit frosty or a little bit wet, or I just have really short nails, it can be a little tricky to get into. With all the different mounting options, I do think this feeder could very easily be mounted somewhere that is wheelchair accessible, as well as for anyone using a walker or a cane. So if you have some elderly people in your family who really enjoy bird watching, but maybe don't have the mobility to get out to refill feeders all the time, or if you have somebody who can come and refill the feeders for them, I think this is something they might really enjoy. The other pro is that this is a really fun way to share your birding hobby with friends. Whether you're showing people the clips on your phone, sending them the videos and pictures that are coming in from your feeder, or even sharing the birds that are coming to your yard on social media, this is an interactive and engaging way to share your birding hobby. And while I don't have any children myself, I think this is a really great potential tool to get them excited and engaging in nature. And finally, the last pro that I have for you is that if you are a beginner birder or you're still learning a lot of your bird ID, this could be a really fantastic way to get to practice that without having the pressure of trying to figure out what's at your feeder before it leaves. It allows you to take the time to compare the bird that's visiting the feeder with your ID guides without having to invest in a digital camera to try to get better photos of them, and there's no rush to guess which species it is. You can really take your time, focus on those ID features, and practice getting accurate identification. And you don't have to worry, because even if the bird flies off before you figured it out, you still have that video and photo saved on your device that you can reference later. And hopefully, because you can take your time, it means you'll get more accurate at your ID skills and hopefully find new birds. And now for some of the cons or kind of shortfalls that I've noticed with this feeder. So the first one, there is an AI feature. It's not included in the price. It's an extra subscription, and it attempts to identify the birds for you. I do not use this feature. I did not pay for it. I did not try it. But what I do know is that AI identification, while it's starting to improve, it's definitely not there yet. And I do know that it can come up with some inaccurate identifications that are just completely not even in the right area. And I think you'll have much better success by just taking the time to practice the ID yourself and figure it out using the photos and videos the feeder takes, as opposed to relying on an AI software. The other thing is, even if you couldn't figure it out yourself, you have that video clip or that picture, and you could post it in a birding group or send it to some more experienced birders who could probably help you figure it out too. The other kind of downside is that the app notifications are not super accurate, at least for me. So the two kind of push notifications it sends you is that there is motion detected or that there's a squirrel at your feeder. About 70% of the time it's telling me there's a squirrel at my feeder, when usually it's either just a bird or even a vehicle driving by on the street. And so while this is technically an inaccuracy on the app's part, it's actually not that big of a deal to me, because it's still notifying me that something's at the feeder. And even though it identified it wrong, it's still letting me know that I have some new clips to go look at. The other con is that it does have a lower temperature limit. Now, this is kind of to be expected and not really all that surprising, and as I mentioned earlier, minus 30 degrees Celsius does seem to be that lower operating limit. And so there's definitely a few weeks every winter where this feeder just wouldn't be usable, and I would probably have to bring it in and warm it up before putting it back out again. And while this isn't ideal, also keep in mind that my professional camera battery also drains within a few hours of being out in those temperatures, and so it's likely just a limit of the technology more so than a limit of the feeder itself. And so for some people, having to make that extra couple trips out to bring the bird feeder in might not be worth it, but for me, because I have to go out and refill the feeders every couple days anyways, both my regular bird feeders and this camera one, it's really not that big of a deal. And one other con that I'm going to mention is price. This feeder is going to cost more than a typical bird feeder would because of the technology that's involved. And if money is tight for you, there are so many more affordable commercially available bird feeders, and also DIY bird feeders that you can make at home with leftover plastic that you can reuse to make a bird feeder, pop bottles, milk jugs, Cool containers. It is a consumer item that is not necessary, but it's also quite fun if you have the budget and choose to purchase one. Who is this feeder for? This bird feeder is perfect for anyone who wants to know what birds are visiting their yard, both when they are and aren't watching their bird feeders. If you love to share bird photos and videos with your friends, I do really think you would enjoy a camera bird feeder. Or if you have accessibility and health issues that prevent you from getting out birding regularly, this is another option that I do think would be quite useful for those people as well. I do really think that the PeckPerk camera bird feeders are an underutilized accessibility tool in the birding world. I also think this bird feeder would be really great for children of a variety of ages. as well as birders who may be in nursing homes or assisted care facilities. This feeder could also be really fun for a classroom setting, where teachers can use it to share about the birds in the schoolyard and community. I don't think this feeder has a true age limit, and as long as you know somebody who's able to refill it if you can't, I think you'll have a lot of fun seeing what birds show up to the feeder. I know I'm already looking forward to seeing how many different species I can document throughout the year just on the camera bird feeder alone. So I'm sure you're all wondering how much this bird feeder actually costs and if I recommend it. The basic Avia Peck 1 bird feeder is available on Amazon Canada for $179 and Amazon US for $160 US. As I mentioned earlier, these feeders are not necessary, but I have really enjoyed having it. Comparable bird feeders with the solar panel included are anywhere from 210 Canadian to 370 Canadian dollars. So the PeckPerk bird feeder is actually a pretty affordable option. If you think the PeckPerk bird feeder is for you, I do have an affiliate link in the description below that gives you a 10% discount, or you can also use the code SCBirding on the PeckPerk website. If you use my link, it does help support the channel at no extra cost to you, and thank you if you choose to use it. And so finally, I just wanted to end this video with a couple of tips if you have one of these smart bird feeders or decide to get one, to make sure that you get the best success out of it possible. The first thing is to pay attention to the lighting. If you have sun shining into the lens of the camera, it's probably going to distort your image and photo quality. I chose to set up my camera facing north so that it always has a little bit of shade and universal lighting. The sunny background does create a bit of a contrast, but it's not too bad, and the bird seems to always be decently well lit. Another thing to keep in mind is wherever you're deciding to mount your bird feeder, keep in mind refilling the seed hopper. If you're putting it somewhere that you need a ladder to get to, you're more likely gonna be frustrated with having to refill it. So keep in mind accessibility to the feed hopper, and also making sure you don't block the feed hopper wherever you are setting it up. And finally, keep the squirrels in mind. These bird feeders are plastic and squirrels can definitely chew through them, so keep that in mind when you're mounting it. And so that brings us to the end of this review. If there's anything that I missed answering, please drop it in the comments below. I would love to answer any additional questions you guys have, and I hope that you got all of the information you need to decide if one of these bird feeders is right for you. I really have enjoyed having this bird feeder. I love popping in and seeing what birds have been visiting while I'm working. And I also really like the silly, goofy videos of some of the woodpeckers that have been visiting my feeder. And so I do definitely recommend this product if you have the budget for it. Once again, it's definitely not necessary, and so don't feel like you need one of these bird feeders to be a good birder. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos, and happy birding.